You guys.
How are you?
Doing great, Alicia.
So as usual, we always start out with, your history together. So tell us about how you guys work together at Kino Lorber.
Well, Bret was at Kino even before I was. So, and I started working. I became the head of sales in 1997, and Bret was there. Bret, you could tell him how long before that. But
Well, it's shocking, but I started in January of 88. So I just crossed my 37-year mark,
you've
if I'm
had a
doing
couple of
math
periods where you
correctly.
left for a short period, I think, right between the 88
Right.
and
And also I started in New York at the office doing non-theatrical sales, moved to Atlanta, moved back to New York. But that's how long uh, I've been with the company. And then you came in and we started working together. At that time, I think I was doing a lot of package design. I can't remember if I was the art director at that time. I've kind of changed desks a lot
no,
through.
you were the key. I think you were the main art director. We were still working with other people, but you were the art director, but you worked on projects, the specialty projects like the highway films, the and all those other things that you did. The special features that we did. And I remember during that time we were making a documentary on horror films, and we got Rod
Yeah.
Steiger to do the narration, which was like a really great. We were all excited about it. Okay, can I believe we're going to be working with Rod Steiger? So, but yeah, there was that period. It was a different company at that time. We did
Yeah.
our first studio deal. Don Krim did a deal with Universal where we released a few titles like Love Me Tonight and a couple other ones that we ended up Man Who Laughs and stuff like that. We ended up re-releasing some of them. But yeah, so Bret and I have been working together for a long, long time. I left for a short period for the 4 years, and then now we're back together. So
And since I have tended to oversee a lot of the film mastering when it's something that we're mastering ourselves, um, Frank will often consult me like, hey, we've got these assets available. What would be the best ones to work from in order to make the best possible master? So we've always sort of communicated on that front. Um, while Frank drives the curatorial bus of Kino Lorber Studio Classics, and I drive the curatorial van. It's a little bit smaller than Frank's bus of Kino Classics, which is archival restorations and things like that.
yeah, and then sometimes some of my studio titles that I acquire, like the silent films and stuff like that, ends up being released by Kino Classics. So Bret oversees since he has a lot more experience with composers and people like that. When we needed a new score, he would be the one that would be handling that, and also the extras, because Bret's released so much more silent films than I have. That you know, and we also regularly work on smaller projects. When I pick up a film, like an independently owned film, like Last of the Dogman or Rawhead Rex or something like that, Brad and I work on those together too, because we're not obligated to work with the big mastering houses that studios usually ask us to work with. So, uh,
So have you guys always had a very collaborative relationship at Kino Lorber? You've always sort of worked together throughout the years?
We
yeah,
have, but I don't think we've worked in the office together very much.
we did that for a short period of
Just
time.
a
I
little
remember
bit.
we used
Yeah.
to we used to always have lunch together, the four of us, the three of us,
Ah, that's right. I
myself,
forgot.
you, myself, Brian, and then Alan. I remember the four of us would go. So there was a short period where we all worked together. When Bret moved back to Atlanta, um, I would visit him once in a while, and then
Right. Yeah.
then he would we would take car like road trips. Like I would go see Ingram at Nashville, and Bret would drive me there and then drive back. So we would do smaller things, and we used to go to the conventions together, the VSDA. We had the highlight of those trips was when we went to the Burt Reynolds one man show. That was a lot of fun. So there was yeah, so yeah, no, we used to do things together, and then there was
Yeah.
also whenever he came back to New York, we were both big movie fans, so we would talk about films or our likes and dislikes and stuff like that. And
Do you go see movies together?
we did for a
I
period.
think so,
We used to see
yeah.
a lot of stuff together. And then besides the conventions and the trips, we also worked on a very. You remember the project where we dubbed the film in Atlanta? We had picked up this kind of a cool Korean horror, not horror, more of a serial killer
Yeah,
type of
yeah.
film, and we felt like Blockbuster would buy a lot more units, and we had a dub version. So we actually ended up overseeing the dubbing of that in Atlanta for and did it. I think we worked on it for the whole weekend, right? That's what it was.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
um,
it's funny, Kino Lorber is a very collaborative kind of company where uh, there are not so many walls between the departments because, when Frank acquires a film, he wants to, for instance, know what the box cover is going to look like. He's going to, so he works closely with the artists who design his covers. And uh, if I see he's coming out with something and I know of an extra that would be good for it, I'll say, hey, you should include this. And there's always that kind of thing too. And for Kino Cult, which I know we'll get to in a second, Frank will often acquire titles and sort of earmark them for Kino Cult, knowing that that would be a great place for them. So it's nice to be at a company where there is communication between the departments, and you get to have some creative input to, all the different facets of producing and releasing the film. So that's what I think that we enjoy that a lot, curating the special features, overseeing the package design, the liner notes, because that's really where you leave your mark on it. Other than the fact that, I'm very proud of the fact that, we have kept so many films in print that otherwise would not be available right now. And so that's really our big contribution, I think, to film culture, whether it's, noticed or acknowledged or appreciated. But when you look back, someone's gonna be like, Kino Lorber put out a ton of movies that would never have been out on physical media, otherwise, because that's just our model. We release a lot of films, and that allows us to get into some of the nooks and crannies instead of just cherry picking the biggest sellers.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, and I also like that was always what we were about. And when I started doing my studio deals, I continued doing that. I continued picking up the smaller films and giving them a chance, and sometimes some of those smaller films have, they turn out to be really great titles that sold really well for us, besides the fact that they were already good films. So it was never for us, it's never always about just making money. It's always about the love of film and making sure that we give everything the TLC they deserve. So film is, it's when it comes to like Bret, you could also mention the fact that I was about to go ahead with my release of Donovan's Reef, and you were like, "Hey, Frank, I got this." You could go ahead and say what it was, and uh,
Yeah, we
you know,
actually
you,
happen to have a copy of a John Ford film made for the Navy, I think, called The Growler Story, which is also set in Hawaii, like Donovan's Reef. So it was a perfect thing to add to the Donovan's Reef release that Frank wouldn't have known about because I have all sorts of things hiding on hard drives. It just happened to ring a bell when I saw Donovan's Reef. So we're kind of always looking over each other's shoulders and seeing what we can add and provide that sort of, the
yeah, and I
value
and
Love
I,
that.
I get I have
approach.
a lot of connections with the TV spots and radio spots and stuff like that. And sometimes I get something that I know he's working on. I get it at the last second and I send it to him. I mean, right now, the Donovan's Reef was just going to include two commentaries and a and a trailer because there's not much more available. Most of the cast and crew they're no longer around. But adding this nice little short film that John Ford directed in 1950 from 1957 as an extra is a nice little bonus. So there's always things like that, but we regularly discuss releases. Should this be a Studio Classics release or a Kino Cult release? In the past, it was like, should this be a Kino Classics release or a Studio Classic release? Um, People always ask us why. How do we decide what goes where? most of the time it's this pretty obvious what's what, but once in a while I do cheat and take something that I really like and put it out of Studio Classic.
I guess
Like,
that's allowed once in a while because
you know,
usually it
once in a
seems
while.
like a
Once in a while,
very
it's like, okay, all the
it's a
silent
very
films are
collaborative
with, no,
spirit.
a couple of John Ford silent films are Studio Classics. So,
But I like that it's, it's all hands on deck. You're not just
Yeah.
hoarding all these titles to yourself. You look out for each other. And I want to say that it seems like Kino Lorber is one of those rare cases where it's quality and quantity, where like
yeah.
quantity is just as important as the quality here, and neither is sacrificed. So it's very rare, and that's really awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
and when Frank was talking about the, being driven not so much by, purely by profit, I think so many of our decisions are made just based on our love of film and the fact that, we don't think too much about how commercial is it. If it's here's a pocket of film that, is underappreciated and I've always wanted to release a film by X, we do it because and we feel that the film community who are our consumers, but we consider them more of like the community, appreciate that. And there's people who like the most obscure things, so we know that no matter what we put out, there's an audience for it. And because people support the wide slate of releases, we can put out these more obscure films and know that the Kino Lorber Studio Classics family is going to continue to support them when we go out on a limb and take a risk sometimes.
do
Yeah,
you
and we
is that a
appreciate, go ahead,
oh no
Alicia.
no no go ahead, Frank.
No, and we appreciate the fans. The fans, that's we're here because of them. I mean, mainly that's what it is. And but sometimes because of the chances we take, they think a lot of their own personal favorite films could be released. And in some cases, yes, we do pick up some, still pick up some B movies here and there. I'm still um try, if the asking price is a fair price, I would still pick up B films and sometimes even C films, but at the same time, when we try something and it doesn't work, as much as we would love to continue doing it, like serials and sometimes, we did all these True Color Republic titles. Um, they just didn't sell as well as we did, and some as well as some other stuff is done. Um, and so we decided to hit the brakes on that and maybe look elsewhere and try to do other things. And at one point, one of the new labels we have is the Kino Cult label, and this is something that Bret had been working on for a long time as a streaming side of it. And then you could go ahead, Bret, and mention how it all started and where we are now.
Yeah,
Yep,
so
exactly.
Kino Cult originally, and hopefully there are some super fans out here who remember that, was a AVOD, ad-supported VOD, first as a on demand, so you would have a list of films you can scroll through and choose the movie, and then eventually we started a fast channel, so we had 24 hours, 7 days a week programming, and it was the craziest thing in the world that you could get free uh, Jean Rollin movies, Mario Bava movies, all this great Euro horror stuff and Euro crime films, classics. We're throwing everything in there, exploitation films. And it's just like you can turn on your TV to this channel or this app. And we were on Roku and I think Apple TV and just have free cult movies around the clock. Um, Unfortunately, the way AVOD has evolved, this kind of programming doesn't exactly fit that so well. I mean, this kind of niche or niche cult cinema is so niche. It's not like uh, you know, Plan 9 from Outer Space, drive-in type movies. This is like the real hardcore cult stuff, and that we've since found works better in physical media where it's aimed more at the collector and people who, cherish or value the rarity or scarcity of a film and want to own a copy. And this is all the more reason why you should own a copy because as wonderful as Kino Cult, the AVOD channel and on-demand, app was, it's gone now. So you no longer have those free films on demand. So again, it all comes back to support physical media because that's the way, you're going to have something 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I remember as soon as Bret started showing me the logos and everything, I got it right away. I'm like, okay, this will be a physical media brand
Yeah.
eventually, because there was a period where I was releasing a lot of stuff at Studio Classics where I was like, wow, I'm really pushing this because there's so many films that I was putting out Studio Classics that I had no business being released at Studio Classics, and the Kino Cult brand would have been a perfect home for them at that point, but we didn't have it at that point. So now that we have that, and the Elsa films, which I know everybody's going to ask when it's coming out, We promise they will be out this year. We
Come on,
promise.
Frank, give us a street date.
I'm hoping by September, maybe October. It's been a very complicated process. It's 4 films, and the film elements were in Canada, and uh, with the University of Toronto, and we had to get access, and then the scanning and the work. A lot of the work had to be done in Canada, so we're close. We're close. I think 2 of the films are complete. I think uh, one needs to be color graded still, and the other one is almost finished. So
And you've been working on this for like a solid 2 years, right? This has been going on
yeah,
a
it
while.
took us
Yeah.
forever to actually get this to actually uh, first. It's one of those. There's a lot of political, things that we have to deal with. When it comes to you have to deal with the University of Toronto. You have to, well, how are we going to get access to this, and why would they work with us on these? And so we had to, promise them some stuff, including, of course, nice, beautiful copies of the HD masters. And but this is a situation where I think these are going to come out. They're probably going to be the biggest releases that we've had under the Kino Cult brand. But the Kino Cult brand has done very well for us so far. We've been very happy with the releases. The last MGM deal I did, I specifically picked up a dozen or so titles for the brand, and now pretty much Bret he's overseeing all the Kino Cult stuff. So even if I acquire something for the brand, I usually hand it off to him and say, here, I still want to be kind of a little bit involved in the look of it and everything else, but outside of that, it's his baby now. So, because I have my hands full with Studio Classics, which
Yeah.
I'm also, like, as we spoke to Rob Sweeney last time, I'm handing off a lot of the Studio Classic titles to Rob Sweeney. So, it's
Yes.
go
Sometimes
ahead,
you
Ray.
play the long game, like with Ilsa, and you know it's going to take forever, but it's worth it. So you stay with it, and you don't stare at the clock too much. Other times a film will fall on your lap. You'll get a master, and you can flip it to video in 6 months. But it's almost like you have all these different timers going in your house, and you're trying to schedule like, well, this one's going to be done here, so maybe we can put it out in the summer. So that's why when someone asks when something's coming out, there's never a simple answer because we're always managing a flow of films from different sources. Some are being mastered, some are not being mastered, and it's all about being nimble, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you know that the wait is going to be worth it because the anticipation is voracious. So people are really excited about the ISA releases. So yeah, it'll be worth all the wait and all the hard work. So is Kino Cult going to continue to evolve? What does it look like, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now? Or is this, you're going to continue just putting
No,
out really great
they
releases?
even now it's evolving because we're trying to figure out what Kino Cult should be. What is the brand? On one hand, we know certain films certainly fall into like the Kino Cult brand, but then there are others that are a little, it depends on your definition of cult. So, for instance, I've acquired a number of films from Something Weird Video, whose films tend to be more on the side of like nudie cuties, exploitation films. Um, and we did some sort of unconventional things. We did with the UCLA Film Archive this film Drifter, which is kind of a queer cinema film from the 70s that was never really released. But it's like, we want to sort of explore what the different kinds of cult films so that the bread and butter is going to be horror, science fiction, and things like that. But then again, it's nice to bring in something that is someone else's kind of cult. And in fact, I can show you a couple of things that I'm working on that are really involved restorations. But earlier, actually, I think it was last year, we did the Betty Page films, Teaserama and Varieties. This was with Something Weird, going back to the original 16 millimeter camera elements. And so we're doing something similar with sort of pinup photographer Bunny Yeager. And there were two films made sort of about her and her work. There's Bunny Yeager's Nude Las Vegas. And we're also working on Bunny Yeager's Nude Camera, which are interesting because they're not, yes, they were made kind of for the grindhouse exploitation circuit, but it really does show a lot about her philosophy of being a photographer, how her being a woman helps put models at ease because they feel like they can trust her, and how she goes about convincing someone to pose. So they're interesting, they're beautiful to look at, and not exactly like the bullseye of what you would think a cult movie is, but at the same time we like to think it's a moving target, and we're throwing darts outside the circle sometimes.
I like that. It's fluid.
And then there's also I just acquired two films independently that the past there would have been Studio Classics releases, but I looked at both of them. I'm like, no, these are really Kino Cult titles. So I haven't even told Bret about them yet. So I'm gonna talk to him about it tomorrow. But one of the films has an HD master, brand new master that was just done. And it's more of a Blu-ray release. That one's gonna be ready to go. The other one, of course, we're gonna try to get a couple of extras and stuff done for it. The other one, they have all the needed film elements. It's the bigger film, and it's borderline 4K. We're probably going to release it on 4K. So after the Elsa films, I think that will be the next. I mean, it may come out before the Elsa films. I don't know because of how long the Elsa films have taken. But that will be another 4K release. People always wonder like why we sometimes announce something on a weekend and saying this is coming soon, and it comes out 2 months later, and then something's been announced over a year ago and hasn't come out yet because you run into issues. You run into film element issues, rights issues. The filmmakers sometimes being a little difficult to deal with. So those type of things that come up, we cannot be ready for. So to be honest, when we picked up the Elsa films, we thought we were going to release them right away. We never thought it was going to take as long as it has. But the good news is that they're still coming out. Just please be patient. So.
And to just sort of hint at some of the things to come, the first Kino Cult title was a Jess Franco film, Lorna the Exorcist. And we do have some more Jess Franco coming in 2025. We can't say which yet. And one of my favorite UCLA Film Archive did the sort of rediscovery and restoration of the films, but the TV movies, the classic ghosts. And we're going to be doing a number of releases of 1970s made-for-TV horror in the months ahead. So those are just a couple of other things.
People are going to be very happy about that selection. This was Bret's. He went and he located when I give him some contact info and stuff like that, but he's the one that really wanted to see if these were available. He found a way to acquire them, and it's going to be some really good releases. I, of course, saw one film in there and said, hey, can I have that for Studio Classics? and took that one. But the rest of the films are going to come out as Kino Cult, the TV stuff. And I think people are going to be very, very happy with the selection. So
Very cool. Well, besides Kino Cult, Brett, you also work on some historically significant projects. Like the pioneers of African American cinema, pioneers of the first female filmmakers. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes into restoring big projects like that?
Yeah, those are fun to do, but also like a nightmare because there's so many pieces. When you're talking about like a 5 disc set of features and shorts, and those can take a couple of years to fully produce. But one of the ones I'm most proud of that I did recently was, I guess it's been almost 2 years now, the Soundies. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, the definitive. Anyway, but 4 or 5 disc collection of Soundies, which are the 1940s musical shorts, which we worked on with curator Susan Delson, and the restorations primarily done by the Library of Congress, the scanning, and then we did the restoration work. And so, yeah, the way those evolve is sometimes someone will come to us. For instance, the curators of the Cinema's First Nasty Women, which are female comedian silent films, Maggie Henenfeld and Laura Horak, came to us and said, "Hey, would you be interested in releasing these films?" And so we partnered with them in the, communication with the archives and, getting all of these films scored because they're silent films. And then one that's coming up later this year is one that was suggested by two of the archivists who work at the Library of Congress, George Williman and Lenan Schweighofer, who they're the ones who George works in the nitrate vault in the Library of Congress. And so he and Lenan see, all the stuff like the real rare fragments and oddities in the Library of Congress. And so the project that they want to do, which is coming out later this year, is called Silent Dogs. And so it's just silent movies, not just that happen to have a dog, but where the dog is the star or the dog is billed. So there are all these dog stars after Ren 1010 came out. And so there's these dog stars we've never heard of. And so we're going to have those, which will be shorts and features. And this is maybe a good point at which to put my
I feel
own
like I was
overactive,
just gonna
my
say,
dog who is not silent,
he's
clearly,
pretty silent.
he's
He's
not
very
bad, but
well
he just,
behaved for the most part.
he might get crated here in a second. But yeah, so, I'll do these big multi-disc collections. And then in addition to that, kind of one-off single film restorations. And that's really what I have traditionally done for Kino Lorber. So before I was working with Frank on Kino Cult, I was producing and overseeing the release of the Kino Classics. Rob Sweeney also does Kino Classics, where we cross-pollinate a lot.
Now, are these, specific labels and projects you work on based on your own interests in film? Like, were you always drawn to cult films and classic films, or did it just happen that way? How your role
Yeah,
expanded.
I mean, that certainly, like, I was always into silent film. And in fact, the way I got my job at Kino, going way back, was at the time Dennis Doros was working at Kino International before we were Lorber. And he had come to my college to screen a restoration he produced, Queen Kelly, for Kino. And, we hit it off. He knew I was interested in silent films, and we, talked and corresponded. And so when a job opened up, he knew I was someone who was, into film and specifically silent film. And so he recommended me for the job, and, flash forward 38
37
years
years.
later, and here we are. But yeah, I mean, but I don't just work within films that I know. It's important, and I know Frank feels the same way, that you have to sort of be aware and knowledgeable about all different kinds of films. So even if it's not your particular cup of tea, you see its value, you know that there's an audience for it. But yeah, it's driven by my and our, genuine and eclectic interest in film.
I
yeah,
feel
like
like,
when
Yeah,
I
go
got
ahead.
a list from Universal for all the silent films they were remastering, I shared it with Bret and with Rob Sweeney because I feel like they know more about silent films than I do. I mean, I like silent films. I said, I'm a fan of like the key ones, some of the bigger ones. Mostly the comedies and the horror ones. Those are the ones I really like. Um, but they're more, you have to if you have, like this is the thing that people. That's why we make a good team because he would see a list of films that he's not as familiar with that he thinks that I may know more of. He would say, Frank, what do you think of these? And vice versa, I would do the same thing. If I get a list of early sound films or silent films and stuff like that, I know that they know more about those and they know. So big directors, stuff like that, those are no-brainers. Anybody could figure those out. But it's always like this is the smaller ones that we want to take a chance on, and how are we going to package these? How are we going to put these as a collection and stuff like that? And so, you know, my whole start with Kino was I worked at Kim's Video. I was the head buyer for over there, and then uh, my sales rep was going to leave the company, Lance, and Lance Schwartz, and he pretty much called me up and said, "Hey, this job is available. Do you want to try? Do you want to take it? Do you want to come and interview for it?" And I was like, I wasn't sure, but then I was like, let me try this, see how it goes, and that's how it happened. It's just he met Doris, and I met. I was dealing with Lance regularly, so he knew how much I knew about film. I think I've shown this in the past, but this this was I got this when I was at Kim's Video when they released these film noirs. And I remember looking at this and I was like, this would be a great company to work for one day. And that was how it all started. So I saw them changing. I saw them like, okay, at one point I was like, no, I'm not interested in working for this company. But when I started doing this type of things, I was like, okay, now I think I could go there and make a difference. And that's what
But
happened.
you've really shaped the company, the kinds of film the company releases, because we were not doing a lot of studio product, and occasionally a classic, but not the breadth of the library that you've cultivated.
No, I mean that's the thing. When the merger happened, I went to Don and I said, listen, I got this package of films from Paramount that I think we should go after and pick up. The advances are not very high. I think we could afford to do them. And at that time, God bless his soul, Donald Krim did not want to do that. And came to the point where I was tired of re-releasing the same bunch of films, and so I decided to leave, and that's what I did. And I kind of, I went to all the films and I built, I was like my experience of releasing films over there also kind of made me want to do more of that when I saw that wasn't going to work anymore. So after 4 years of working with Olive, I decided to come back to Kino, and and the rest is history. And that's how we started the Studio Classics, brand. So
Well, before we get into our audience questions, and please, guys, don't be shy. If you're watching and you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. Bret, I wanted to ask you about your filmmaking, experience, and you're also a filmmaker. So, like, how did you get into that, and what kind of stories do you like to tell?
Well, it's interesting. Frank mentioned we did a documentary about silent horror. That was something that Don Krim wanted to do. Actually, we did one on Lon Chaney first, then silent horror. And then my first sort of film on my own was a documentary about driver's ed films, which Frank sort of alluded to earlier, called Hell's Highway, the true story of highway safety films, which is the death on the highway graphic films that they used to show in high schools and mainly in the 60s and early 70s. And then from there, I started making, narrative films, usually kind of dark and moody. Let's see, Psychopathia Sexualis was the first narrative feature I did. Most recently, there's one called Those Who Deserve to Die. And The Unwanted with Hannah Fierman and William Catt. But it's interesting going back to the first one, Hell's Highway. One of the things I'm doing now in my spare time is we've remastered a lot of the original Driver's Ed films and also remastered some of the interview footage we shot because that was produced in standard def, so that it can be upgraded to HD. Because once a film's standard def, it has kind of a limited lifespan in like the digital world and in the physical world compared to HD when you can really, it can have broader exposure. So I'm in the process of sort of replacing all the film clips with upgraded, newly remastered film clips. So that's something that hopefully will come out later this year. And in addition to the filmmaking, I also produced a couple of scripted podcasts, like narrative dramas. One is called The Control Group. We did 2 seasons of that, and that was for iHeartRadio. And then a show called The Seventh Daughter. And both of those are like 8 episodes and, full music, sound design, and everything. So it's always, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. I am not going to be the kind, I'm not moving out west or anything, but I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to work with like independent filmmakers and to be able to create these things and sort of achieve that dream on my own little scale.
Well, Atlanta has like a pretty bustling industry and scene, right? I mean, they call
Yeah,
it
now
the
it's
South
like,
for a reason. Do
and
you find
I live
that?
about maybe 2 miles from the Tyler Perry Studios. So I'm on the south
There you
side.
go.
So I drive by Tyler's place every so often. They won't let me in.
Do you feel like as a filmmaker, you have all the resources, you have the community you need right there in Atlanta. You don't need to move to Hollywood, move to LA.
Yeah, but you don't, there's the whole machine of uh I think the more I've been a do-it-yourself filmmaker, the more I've learned that so much of uh even in the independent film level is about kind of the deal making, the packaging of something, and kind of getting it into festivals. I've had good luck, festival wise, but there's a network to be sure. And I'm not saying you got to be in LA or New York to do it, but that's to me, I was a do-it-yourself guy. I want to go out and paint my garage. I would just get my brush and go do it. And so that's how I approached filmmaking, which I had total control, but it also meant limited, exposure and visibility.
Yeah,
Just because I didn't, have that kind of, you know, network of, you know,
totally get it.
yeah,
I'm an actor in New Orleans, so it's like Hollywood South mini.
yeah.
So I feel you. Okay. Do you guys want to make any announcements or anything before we answer some audience questions? Let me
No,
see.
I mean, I think we're very close to signing some deals, so there's not that much left to announce. But I do have, like I've said, I was being interviewed by Heath at Serial Midnight. I mentioned that there's like a movie that's been like a bucket list holy grail type of a release that I've been wanting to release for a long, long time that we're gonna hopefully announce a little bit later. We're working right now on the restoration of it and the extras and everything else. But that's announced, that will be a really good one that I think fans will be very excited about. But at this point, we're just gonna. I don't think we really have that much more to announce besides that I'm working on a bunch of uh, new deals.
Cool, very exciting. All right, let's jump into our audience questions. We have one from Powder Keg, who asks, "This may have been answered before, but why is the slipcover spine art different from the case spine font? Is it a cost-cutting measure? Just curious."
Just
That's Studio Classics, Bret.
okay.
Uh, we released like 2,000 Studio Classic titles with the same look, And when we did our first O card, we were like, for the O card, let's put the title treatment, the film title treatment on the spines, like most other companies do. So no, it's always been like that. This is not something to save money. We were our Studio Classics, as you can see behind, Alicia. They're all their signature. They have a signature look to them, same font and everything else. The O cards, we decided to go the other way. Now for the Kino Cult brand, we decided to not do that. The spine for the O card in the wrap, it looks exactly the same. So
Gotcha. Mark Patel is asking, I've noticed a lot of the Kino Cult are re-releases. Will there be more new to Blu-ray titles? I'm hoping for Chatterbox, Unholy Rollers, Bamboo Gods, and Iron Man, Wicked Stepmother.
Ooh, man, I would be up for those. Yes, there are definitely new things coming. In addition to the Bunny Yeager films we talked about, the TV movies, well, the Jess Franco films, I think that's going to be four that have not been on Blu-ray before.
what's you could mention, I guess, the April release, right? What you're working on right now.
Hang on. Wait, which one?
the
Well, we know has
Pete
like
Walker, the Pete Walker crime films.
right. But those have been some of those. Well, Cool It Carol is a Pete Walker film that has not been available in the US on Blu-ray. So we're putting that out with three of Pete Walker's other crime films, Moon, The Big Switch, and Die Screaming Marianne. So that's kind of a hybrid of something new with something reissued. Um,
It's going to be 4 films on 2 discs. I think it's Kino Cult number 29. So,
I'm
and
just looking at my list because there's so many things that are like we haven't quite signed yet, so we don't want to say. So I'm going to have to hold my tongue and not, I want to have a headline, but let's just say there are, I would say probably 10 to 12 first time on Blu-ray Kino Cult titles coming up in 2025, at least, you know.
Nice. Nice. TJ Moore is asking, how many 3D re-releases are you planning to release this year?
Well, can we tell them about the one, Frank, that
yeah. That we've announced it before. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're working on Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, which is a Euro horror 3D film. We're working with Robert Furmanek and the 3D Film Archive. We are going to do, it's a tricky thing with 3D because now it's so hard to get a true 3D TV setup that people need the anaglyph version. So we are going to reissue the Stewardesses on Kino Cult, which has been released in the 3D stereoscopic version only, but not anaglyph, which is the red and blue glasses type. And so Bob Furmanek is in the midst of, adapting the 3D to the anaglyph version. So that's one 3D film we'll be doing this year. So that's two I can think of.
I think the
And
Bubble
you've got
also
other
he's
stuff.
working on. Isn't he working on the Bubble also?
The Bubble, which is the Arch Oboler science fiction film, and that is not just a re-release. It is something we have put out before, but Bob has the extended roadshow cut, so it's quite a bit longer. And I think it will also be dual format, both the stereoscopic and the anaglyph 3D versions.
Well, I think in March we're releasing The Glass Web, which is the classic Edward G. Robinson film noir. We also have Hyperspace with the Christmas short film by the same director. That's going to be coming out. And then the really big one, which is Money from Home, the Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin comedy classic, which is like an incredible restoration because the good people at Paramount scanned I don't know how many how many cans of film to deliver, and it's like a complete beautiful 4K scan reconstruction of that film, and it's going to look amazing. So that one I'm hoping that will be the last one coming out. I think Hyperspace should be sometime, hopefully by the summer. Frankenstein, I think Bret probably around the summer, something like that, right? You would
Yeah,
say,
I'd say so. Yeah,
yeah. And you did receive the masters I sent you, right?
I did. Yep. They're
Okay.
now in the hands of video restoration. So we'll see what we come
All
back
right,
with.
so that's so yeah, I think that's it for the 3D films. There's not much left. I mean, there's a few studio titles that are still I think Sony has a few that have never been released, and there's some shorts with the studios that never been released, and
But that's a lot.
also
You
I think
rattled off like
eh,
8 titles that we're doing this year. You would think that no one's doing 3D anymore, but somehow we managed to find, you know, films
I've
to do.
I've always kind of championed the format, so I
Yeah.
was like one of the first labels to put him out when I was at Olive. So Bob always wants to give me credit for that, which I appreciate. And but yeah, we couldn't have released all of those 3D films without him, and they wouldn't have been able to get them released without us, So
All right. So it sounds like there's a lot to look forward to. We have quite a few questions now. They all
Uh-oh.
started rolling
We
in.
do rapid fire if we
Just,
need to.
yeah, sorry.
And only ask yes or no
Kaleidoscope.
questions.
Well, actually, this is a yes or no question, but I'm sure you'll want to elaborate. Kaleidoscope Seattle is asking, any more Ken Russell in the works?
no,
That's a
you
short
got
answer.
anything?
But I will say I'm
No,
really
it's not. I
proud
mean, there's
of,
a couple of movies that I was interested in picking up, but they're not available, so they're
yeah.
with others another labels. So
But
Okay.
horror is just coming out right about now, right? Ken Russell's horror. I'm pretty
right,
sure it might have
yeah,
just come out, but that one uh, we're excited about because it also has footage of the censored version. If you can't see it, at least, or if you can't say it, at least see it. The backstory of which is the film horror, Blockbuster wouldn't carry it. And so Vidmark didn't want to lose the Blockbuster sale, so they changed the title from horror to if you can't say it, at least see it. And so anyway, one of the more strange little episodes of film history is when films were being modified
yeah.
for
I
that
had
market,
to
you know.
edit Piano Teacher, and I had to edit Takeshi Miike's Dead or Alive. So I remember going through all of that. But hey, they bought a lot of units, so
It
yes.
was worth it. I mean, my movie Psychopathia Sexualis was unrated and we got it rated just for Blockbuster and had to cut out a couple of scenes. So um but again, it's just that kind of organic thing. We're flexible and we're not gonna be so rigid that we say, no, we're not gonna, issue a different version, but we always make sure that an uncut version is available. We would never just do, say, a rated version without also offering the unrated version, unless there's some extreme reason not to, which I can't think of off the top of my head. That was not a yes or no
I
answer.
think the
Sorry.
Ken Russell fan wanted to say yes, we have the witches, but that's not that's not that's never gonna. We would love to release that film if it was available to us, but it's not available. So
All right.
anyway, let's go to the next question.
Okay, Real Back One is asking, I'm super duper excited about the Oscar Me Show box set. Are there any plans to release any more Black Cast films from the past this year?
Well, we did last year a great double feature, I think, of Heidi Ho with Cab Calloway and Boarding House Blues with Moms Mabley. And the cool thing about those is the Library of Congress has the original camera negatives of both. So while these are two films, your classic black cast comedy musical, and they've been out on, kind of crummy DVDs and on YouTube, but seeing them from the original negative kind of like restores a luster to them that they haven't had. And it's something we try to do that even a movie that kind of a minor film. We want to go, as far as we can to make it look as good as it possibly can. And that's something we've, through our conversations with the Library of Congress, knew about the existence of these elements, and then that release came together. And in fact, we've talked about doing more. I can tell you one, Black Chariot, which is a film that was made in the 70s and only got a very small release because it was independently produced and independently distributed. But we worked with the family of the filmmaker and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture to get access to their restoration. Also, one of the filmmakers made for television shorts called The Upper Chamber. So yes, there is more on the slate. Black Chariot for sure, and possibly more.
Yeah, and I meant the
being
devils, not
interested in the Oscar Michaud set.
and I meant the devils, not the witches. So
Oh yeah.
anyway, let's go. We
That's Nicholas Roeg, who always reminds me of
yeah. Well, the witches is a very cute movie, so which was remade a couple of years ago.
Devils.
So
All right, Raven Medell is asking, are there any updates for the Bottoms Blu-ray? I know it was set to be released earlier this year, wondering if there was an approximate month.
yeah, it's almost finished. Rob Sweeney's handling that one. I hand it off to him. It's gonna be loaded with extras. It's just the final few extras have to be approved by the studio and some talent and people like the people that are involved. So I'm hoping. I would say if I had to guess, I would say June or July. It's gonna come out.
Cool, perfect summer release. This one is from Gerardo Paron. What is your criteria for releasing and re-releasing titles in 4K? In other words, which title gets the special treatment? I feel like you've answered this before, but
Yeah, I mean it's when I look at something that's done very well for us on Blu-ray, it gives me more confidence. When it comes to a film that I'm newly acquiring, I kind of think of similar films that I've released and say, all right, how much do I think it's going to do? And but when it comes to like I always bring up The Train, that's a film that we picked up because I decided to put it on 4K because it was released twice by Twilight Times at 3,000 limited editions, and both times it sold out. We put it out on Blu-ray and I think did around 7,000 units. So just the fact that it had done that much business, I realized I was like, this has a chance. Let's put it out on 4K, and we did, and it was a good decision. There are no-brainers, of course, that everybody wants to put out, but the smaller films, you have to be careful how many of those you pick up and how many of those you decide to put out on 4K and you don't. So we do have there is a system that I go by, but also another thing is if the restoration has already been done and the advance that we're paying is not that high, then I'm willing to take a risk. I'm willing to put out something on 4K because I'm not expecting it to do the kind of numbers that Mad Max or Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something like that did. So.
And we still will archive 4K masters when we get them if it's a smaller film that's not quite there yet. Like some of the exploitation films, I brought visual aids, like Cocaine Fiends and Road to Ruin. We have 4K masters. We did 4K restorations, but this market is not quite, unless, if 4K disc sales boom, then we can start getting some of the marginal titles released on 4K. But right now we have to be a little bit conservative about what, we invest in.
Yeah, I don't think we got to get to that point, Brett, where we're going to be. I would love to see
Frank, it's going to happen, man. Christmas
Fiends on 4K UHD with Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. But it's not going to happen. So.
All right, we have a few more questions, and I think we're just gonna go over a little bit. I think that's fine. But Gargano A is asking, along with the Jack Benny double feature, will we see more classic comedy come to Kino this year and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, standalone comedies that I've released in the past. I mean, if it's like a major star like Bob Hope, or if I could get like the Jerry Lewis films with D. Martin films from Paramount, I could see us doing things like that. But releasing the Jack Benny thing was like a perfect double feature. You know, they're both made around the same time. They're both Universal. They're both really good films. And he's a major, major TV star. He was more of a TV star and a stage star than he was a movie star. So I felt like it was something we could take a chance on. But yeah, but most of the time, unless it's like I would say it has to be like a major um, uh, comedy star or like a duo. Like if I got like the Lauren Hardy films, sometimes newly restored or something like that, on Three Stooges and stuff like that, I would do them if they became available to me, you know. So Abbott and Costello, whatever else.
Gotcha. Jordan asks, this is a very technical question. For film restoration professionals, are there any rules of thumb for project costs to restore films? For example, dollars per minute to upgrade a film from 1080 to 4K, or X amount of dollars to upgrade a feature film from SDR to HDR, etc.
Brett, you're muted.
Oh, Brett, you're on mute.
Every case is a little bit different, and a lot of it depends on the condition of the film when we get a scan. But you know, we don't have a real fixed, this is our restoration queue, because every film's a little bit different. And on some of the archival films, I tend to, especially silent films, I tend to not uh, clean them as much, because with films that are grainy and especially dirty, it starts eating into the detail some. And we still want to like remove the splice marks, the cue marks, and major things like that. But I feel like the needle is kind of moving back into uh, less restoration work rather than more, especially when you see so many people shooting things and movies that are playing in theaters and they've added dirt and grain, and that's what we're trying to take out. So it's like there's a happy medium in there somewhere, and I think it's only a matter of time before people want film to start looking like film again. And so I think that that's always what we've never over cleaned films, and we've never like added grain. We want to make it as a seamless a viewing experience as possible within budgetary constraints, um, but always let you know you're still watching film.
Film is, it's very like Brett said, it's not. Uh, there's no exact science how much something's going to cost or how much. Everything is different. It's all about the film elements. Like people are like, well, if why don't you do a 4K scan of this? Maybe it would have looked better. I said, no, 4K would actually look worse because you're really enhancing all the issues that was there, and so it's not a situation. It's like we're. And I think when it comes to the silent films, the 20s and 30s films, the audience that watches those films, they're more forgiving of speckles and film grain and some dirt and stuff like that. Where people like are watching films from the 50s and 60s, they want everything to look really pristine and look very sharp and clean. So it all depends on where. And then there's labels. I remember with Code Red and Scorpion, sometimes they would leave stuff in just because they wanted to have the films have the grindhouse look, and then they thought that it kind of like added charm to the release. I was like, yeah, you guys are trying to save money, but but that was without a doubt that was the main reason. But the second reason was, again, in a way they were right. When you're watching so I think when it comes to some titles that ends up being in the Kino Cult brand, I think we will probably let some stuff slide where when we're doing something like on 4K in a special edition, we want to make sure we fix everything for every issue. So.
All right, we got 4 or 5 more questions, and then I think we're gonna cut it off. But Nick Tangman is asking, Frank, do you guys have any plans to put out any Japanese films on Blu-ray? I'm a huge Japanese film fan and would like to see Kino put out Japanese titles.
I most of the key ones have been released by other labels. I wish like I could, you have so many other our competitors putting these out that uh which Japanese films they want us to release. I mean, when it comes to the classics, Criterion has most of them. When it comes to the more genre stuff, Arrow does them, and Shout does them and stuff like that. I don't want to go after the leftovers. I'll be honest with you. So, and so yeah, we had released Japanese stuff in the past. We had done deals with Toei and Toho and people, studios like that, but I don't think there's really that much out there for us to put out. So, out. So the answer at this point is no. I don't think we're going to be going after any packages of Japanese films.
Fair enough. This one is from Vivek. When I hear you speaking about a transfer from the camera negative, are you really stating that the studio lets you take possession of their actual camera negative? I'm skeptical. Perhaps there's a step in the process that I'm not aware of. Can you explain in more detail?
The camera negative is usually stored at a certain facility. They only allow certain places or certain companies to, it has to be pre-approved um, um, mastering house. This is somebody that they really trust. They've worked with in a lot of cases. They do their own restorations with them. So, like, let's say there are films that we release that the scan happens at Photocam because they're trusted by a lot of the major studios, and the restoration is done with another company. So, they do give us access to the camera negative. We're not making it up. When this is when we say it's from the original camera negative, that's what it is. It's from the original camera negative. They're very protective of nitrate stuff. They're very protective of the 70 millimeter stuff. That's why a lot of those things require 6K to 8K scans. But as long as we're working with somebody that they're comfortable working with, then of course we have access to everything. We're not going and borrowing the camera negatives, putting them on the back of the van and taking it somewhere. That's not happening. It's being scanned by a company that they trust and they work with. So,
and sometimes we work with filmmakers who license us rights, like Beth B, and I think Salvation may have been from an original negative. If it wasn't, occasionally with filmmakers, we get access to their elements. Rhythm Thief is a film we just recently remastered, and we got the negative of that. And if it comes from an archive like the Library of Congress, they have in-house scanner. So it doesn't have to leave the premises, but we can still get access to a negative. So there's different ways we're always trying to find easier ways to get the better material.
But also sometimes if there is no camera negative and the best surviving elements is a fine grain or a interpositive, those require 4K scans. They will not let those be scanned 2K or HD anymore. So if that's the best film elements they have to themselves, if there's the interpositive or the dupe negative or the internegative or whatever they have is that as they consider the best film elements available to them, they have to be scanned in 4K. They cannot be scanned in 2K. So that's also the situation. Yeah, when we say from the original camera negative, it is from the original camera negative.
There you go. You heard it here first. That was a great informative answer. All right, two more questions and then we'll have to call it a day. Nick T asks, are you planning on eventually making a WB deal at some point, possibly later this year or next year?
What deal?
A Warner Brothers deal.
We've reached out to Warner Brothers a bunch of times. We had talks with them last year, and we're continuing to hope that sometime soon we'll do a deal with them. As far as can I tell them that there's no chance? No, there is a chance. Where we've had discussions with them. It's just a matter of them deciding to partner up with us and allow us to release some of their classics. They probably have one of the biggest libraries in the business. They probably have the biggest library because of the RKO and MGM and their own great Warner Brothers stuff. We would love to work with them. But again, that decision is not ours. Just the same as doing releasing Fox films or through Disney. Disney has to reopen the vaults back to us and allow us to do it. We could ask for. We've asked regularly. We reach out to them and say, "Hey, has anything changes? Any policies changes where we could actually come up with do a deal?" At this point, both of those places are told us odds chances of a deal is not not very good. So
Well, there's always the future, so fingers crossed. Okay, last question. Mozart's Ghost asks, some years we seem to get a lot of releases from a particular actor or director. Do different studios and labels talk to each other about what is in the pipeline and try to complement each other?
no, I don't think so. I think it just happens if a lot of those directors work with the same studio. So if I go to Universal and I release a lot of Tony Curtis movies, is because he worked, he made a lot of movies for Universal. Same thing with Rock Hudson or whoever else. And directors, Henry Hathaway, certain filmmakers work with the same studio. Uh, so no, it's just a coincidence. I don't think it has anything to do with like, oh, Kino's releasing a bunch of Barbara Stanwyck movies, so we're all gonna go and release Stanwyck films. No, that's not the case. It's just a situation where whenever you're dealing with a major studio, they tend to have they used to have there was a studio system where they controlled the careers of these actors. So you have actors like Cary Grant who started his career as at Universal and Paramount, and since Universal owns Paramount from 1929 to 1949, all of those films that ends up being with Universal. So
That makes sense. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Brett, thank you for being our special guest today. Frank, thank you as always for being you and for your insight. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions. Those were really great questions. So yes, as always, you can find the titles that we discussed today, along with thousands of others, at kinolorber.com or klstudioclassics.com. Both of those links are in the description below. While you're there, please sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already, and be sure to follow us on social. So that's it for our live episode. Thank you so much, everyone. Be sure to check back next month for episode 9. We'll see
Thank
you
you,
then.
Alicia.
thank
See
Thanks,
you.
you
Brett.
soon, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.